What's up guys, it's me Jeremy and welcome to my support Thresh guide. After playing him in a ton of games and recalculating a few things, I can actually clearly see now that support Thresh is a tier 1 support champion that will definitely be used in competitive play. He might actually even be the best support in the entire game right now. He is fairly comparable to Blitzcrank before a good chunk of his major nerfs, and since Blitzcrank is still tier 1 after those nerfs, Thresh is pretty much an elo generator that remains untapped. In this guide, I'll be assuming that you already know what Thresh does, but I'll be linking the League of Legends page for Thresh in the description, just in case you don't. Anyways, let's start off by going over the pros and cons of Thresh support. Starting with the pros. The first is that he has very high CC. This causes him to be good at full-on 2v2 fights in the bot lane, provided that you can hit your skills, and also give you a lot of potential to outplay your opponents, making him a very strong laner. Next is something quite peculiar and is what I believe makes him borderline overpowered, and that is the fact that Thresh has a melee kit but has a ranged auto attack. This, with the passive on his Q in coordination with the last pro of having a lot of CC, allows him to have the poke of range supports while also having the hard CC and initiation tools of melee supports, and that gives him an extremely solid laning phase. Another thing I've noticed is that he has fairly strong disengage in teamfights due to his ultimate and his E. This should allow you to get out of a lot of fights with a sliver of HP, because once you put down your ultimate and use your E and either flash or use Shurelya's, it becomes almost impossible to chase you down. However, it's important to note that disengage is not the same thing as kiting. Another strength is that his pull can be a very strong initiator for teamfights. This can make it fairly easy to carry games in solo queue, and makes him fantastic at catching people out, similar to how Blitzcrank catches people out as well. Also, his lantern can be an extremely powerful tool, provided that your team knows how to abuse it. It can pull off clutch escapes, crazy jungle ganks, or even just provide a shield to your team. The last pro I came up with for Thresh is that as long as your laning phase doesn't end early, you'll become extremely tanky and have very good armor scaling due to your passive of picking up souls. You aren't as tanky as say a Taric, but you are definitely strong enough to survive most burst damage combos, unlike a lot of other range supports. Alright, now let's move on to the cons. The first con is that every single one of Thresh's ability is a skill shot and can be dodged. More importantly, the hitbox on his Q is actually pretty small, smaller than that of Blitzcrank's hook. His E and ultimate can also still be dodged, and even your W if you place it incorrectly. This causes him to be a fairly high skill cap champion that has a lot of room to be outplayed actually. And also his cast times are somewhat long, especially the one on his Q, but that really just takes a little bit of getting used to and also just makes his skills a little bit harder to hit. Another con is that Thresh's souls are visible to opponents, and while this is a balanced mechanic, it can cause you to take some free poke when you go to pick up souls, or prevent you from picking up those souls entirely, so just watch out for that because it is a major counterplay mechanic for Thresh. Also, Thresh's cooldowns are somewhat long, so just know that when your skills are on cooldown, it removes a decent amount of pressure from the lane, and gives a lot of space for your opponent to fight or harass you for free, so try not to waste your skills too much. The last con I came up with for Thresh is that he has no sustain, which can cause him to be poked down if you start losing trades. However, since bot lane isn't really won by sustain that much anymore, this isn't really that big of a deal as long as you counterplay the sustain lane properly by either keeping constant aggression or forcing an all-in fight when you're at full HP. During the laning phase, you should try to play Thresh in a very safe aggressive way. Harass with your auto attacks when your opposing AD carry goes in for CS, and note that this harass can still be onto the support as your opponent's AD carry is CSing, so they can't hit you back. Thresh is very strong in the early levels as his auto attack damage will matter a lot more, so try to get a free auto attack in whenever the passive on your Q is completely charged up. When you find an opening, go in for a pull. Note that pulling the AD carry is almost always better than pulling the support, but it still can be okay to pull the support in a lot of situations, especially if the support is squishy, like Sona or Zyra. During the teamfight phase, you want to try to get a hook onto a squishy opponent for a solid initiation. However, once the fight actually starts, you'll have to peel for your carries. There's no reason to try to dive your opponents though, as your damage is not high enough to actually do anything or kill anyone. Use your ultimate and your E to kite, and your Q as a CC tool if necessary. And generally use your W as a simple shield during those teamfights. There are a few important things to note about Thresh's lantern. The first is the most obvious, and that is of course to abuse the mechanics of his lantern, and make sure your team can too. I always start off solo queue games as Thresh, reminding my team that they can right click my lantern to jump to me, and it's often met with responses along the line of, "Really?" or "Oh yeah, I need to remember that, thanks for the reminder," and other such phrases. Anyways, the main abuses of his lantern are to first help people escape from tough situations and also to initiate ganks. The range on his lantern is actually really big, but remember that if you do walk out of the range of your lantern, it goes away. So sometimes you might have to wait for your ally to catch up to click that lantern. Also, be sure that you place your lantern where your ally is going to be, not where they currently are, as them having to go back to click on it could often get them CC and killed. Also, it's good to note that Thresh's lantern can actually pick up souls, but since the lantern does have a long cooldown, just be careful because it does leave a slight window of vulnerability. One thing that I really like about Thresh, and that makes him a very strong pick, is that he has almost no bad matchups, due to the fact that he is a ranged support with a melee kit. Thresh has a good, or at least decent matchup against pretty much every single support, except for maybe Lulu. Any support that has good poke or sustain, you can just pull in and kill as they'll be squishy, for example Zyra and Sona. While any tanky initiation support, you can just poke down with your auto attacks and use your strong disengage via your E to avoid fights until you're ready for one and have an advantage. That being said though, Thresh's kit does have a lot of room to be outplayed, so even though you have a good matchup against pretty much every support except for Lulu, they can still outplay you. And the only reason why Lulu is great against Thresh though, is because she has phenomenal poke, as well as having the disengage to where if you pull her, you can't really kill anyone, and she can get rid of the fight entirely. However, on the AD side of things, Thresh does have a few more counter picks. I'd say Thresh has a good or decent matchup against every AD carry except for Ezreal, Corki, and Caitlyn. Thresh really loses to any AD carry that can easily dodge all of his hooks and avoid his poke while also poking him back. Ezreal, Corki, and Caitlyn can all dodge Thresh's abilities with ease, and they also have great poke. Now, while Graves also does fall into this category, Thresh's tankiness diminishes the strengths of Graves' kit, so he isn't that strong against him. All other AD carries are also pretty much just good matchups for Thresh due to his hook and his solid poke. For AD carries to play with Thresh, you want to pick someone that has either high poke or good burst to combo with both strengths of Thresh's kit, or someone that can set up his skill shots for him. Corki, Ezreal, Graves, Draven, Caitlyn, or Misfortune all have great damage in lane, while Ashe, Urgot, and Varus can lock up a target for an easy hook and combo from Thresh. Really though, Thresh can excel with any AD carry, as he's just a strong pick overall. For my masteries, I like to take a very tanky page that is similar to my Taric and Leona pages, which is a 1-22-7 setup. Remember that Thresh's passive works with legendary armor, so that makes it a strong pickup, as well as just making him extremely tanky overall, which makes for a solid laning phase. Even though you poke a lot with your auto attacks, the tankiness is way too valuable to invest all the way into pickpocket for the utility tree. For runes, I'll change my page depending on my matchup. If I'm against an AD carry like Graves or Corki that has high burst, I'll take my standard defense page with armor reds and yellows, with magic resist blues, and gold or movement speed quints depending on your preference. But in most matchups, I'll actually take the same page but instead with AD reds to add to my very strong poke for my auto attacks. For summoner spells, I pretty much always take exhaust and flash. Flash for the necessary escape tool, and exhaust for kiting and lane dominance. Heal or ignite can replace exhaust very occasionally, but in almost all situations I stick with the exhaust. For Thresh's skill order, you want to max Q first to increase the damage on your auto attacks and reduce the cooldown, thus increasing your overall lane pressure and giving less time for counterplay via the CDR. I used to max E on him, but now I've since realized that maxing E second is the way to go, and put a point into your W at level 3 for the utility, and only start actually putting good points into your W once the teamfight phase starts for the increased shield. And of course, put points into your ultimate whenever possible. And now lastly for item builds. I start the standard Fairy Charm, 3 wards and 2 potions on him, as once you get the Fairy Charm, Thresh's mana problems are really just non-existent, as long as you aren't completely wasting your skills, so it's definitely a very necessary pickup. After that I go into a standard tanky support build, with Ruby Sightstone and Philosopher's Stone being my next items, and then building level 1 boots and Shurelya's or Aegis into Bulwark if I'm getting fed. Build my level 2 boots into either Mercs or Tabi depending on the enemy team, and then pick up Shurelya's if I didn't build it, or lock it afterwards, with a situational tanky item at the end. So to recap, my ideal build for support Thresh at the end would be level 2 boots, Shurelya's, Locket, Ruby Sightstone, and either Bulwark or a tanky item like Warmogs or Sunfire Cape depending on the situation. And lastly, a 6th slot for extra wards. Note that you need to always buy wards throughout the game, even in addition to your Sightstone, and you should begin to think about buying oracles after your first major item is completed. Just as a quick update, I want to say that the reason why I haven't been making videos lately is because I had to get my motherboard replaced. But now that it's good to go, I'm excited to try to get out a video for you guys every other day. Also, I've made a Facebook and a Twitter page, so it'd be awesome if you could follow me on those. Of course, I'll have links in the description. So, that's it for my support Thresh guide. I'd love it if you could support me with a like or some feedback in the comments, and if you have any questions, I'd love to answer those in the comments too. Please subscribe for more awesome content in the future, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.